Welcome to the Fantasy Formula One podcast. I'm Paul. That's Ben. And this is the podcast where we use fake money to buy real race teams and win imaginary points in Formula One. And I'm going to start out this podcast with a little bit of an emotional reaction to what went on in Canada. What the hell, man? Okay. So for anybody who didn't watch the race, Ferrari gets 2 DNFs. Both of them 2 DNFs. Now, and if you've listened to the podcast, you know that Ferrari is like one of the go-to teams, and Charles Leclerc is one of my main drivers.
Oh, mine as well.
So I did some of the math because I love my stats, and I took, negative 30-something points for him as my lead driver because of the 2x DNF. In case anybody's curious, if you do truly get 2x of negative points, you do. And then I got, negative 13, 15, whatever points for Ferrari as a constructor, and yeah.
Now, Paul, I got to ask you: do you believe in superstitions at all as it applies to sports?
When I was in the cockpit, when I was a pilot and flying, I sort of believed in superstitions. I wouldn't go against someone else.
You not a little.
You
bit?
have to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go against someone else's superstition.
Sure.
I wouldn't necessarily go all in on mine.
Because I wonder if we've tapped into something inadvertently. Because for those of you listening along, first of all, thank you. But if you were part of the podcast last week, we threw out one key stat that we thought was pretty nifty, which was there were only 3 drivers remaining on the grid that had not DNF'd. And 2 of those 3 were Ferrari drivers, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Did we jinx them?
We might.
Do we have some kind of nebulous power?
If so, I want to market that stuff because now we can do. Oh, here. If so, well, here's a question though: do we have the power for good or just for evil?
I think it's an inverse situation because we were talking about their consistency.
Oh, that's true.
We talked about not DNFing and. For the money, these are the highest point scoring guys, and now if we haven't done that, we haven't crunched the numbers, but I think that stat has been imploded. So I think if there's anyone we do want to sabotage, we got to really talk them up this episode.
You know what? We'll think about that and see what we can come up with because we'll see where the episode progresses because it really should because the problem is anybody who we really want to sabotage. It's got probably somebody we're betting on already.
And I think part of the reason we have this level of reaction is we talk about fantasy Formula One week to week. We think about it way more than I think two middle-aged men should.
Yep.
And so what happens to the basis of our ability to speak with authority when something like this happens? And I think a mediating a mitigating factor is that if you had told me going into the race in Canada, hey, I will bet you that there will be 5 DNFs and 3 of them will be among the top performers on the grid, specifically Ferrari and Red Bull.
Yeah.
I would not have taken that bet.
No, not at all.
This is one of those
not at all.
Happens on the day of, you never know, any given Sunday situation.
Yeah, and as soon as you're saying, well, Mercedes, they're going to do great. George Russell is going to qualify P1 and be like a gunfight with Max Verstappen the entire race until like the last lap. I'd be like, come on, man. Really? Right? No. If you want to put George Russell on your team, Godspeed to you. I wish you all the best, but you shouldn't do it. And then comes Canada, and it's like, well, all right.
And Kevin Magnussen, who is on the verge of losing his license, is going to overtake 10 spots in the first couple laps.
Yeah.
No.
There's no way that's what's going on.
But here we are.
So
yep.
Gotta love it. But and then speaking of Kevin Magnussen, okay, so the three on my team, 3 drivers who all DNF last week were both Haas drivers and Esteban Ocon. And I was like, man, I can't believe it. Well, guess what? Literally the other half of the people that I strongly recommend, both Ferrari drivers and Sergio Perez, they all DNF'd.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, to your point about it being a curse, what did I do last week? What did I do this week? Is this just F1? And gosh, and I'm sorry, with was it Alex Albon who went out?
Yeah.
He freaking Charles Leclerc just spun.
Leclerc took him out.
Took him out, and he didn't have anything to do about it.
No.
And he was just driving, trying to get his race going, and then boom! And it's the beautiful chaos that is. Unlike last year, if you played last year, it was so formulaic. You had to have Max Verstappen, you had to have Sergio Perez, you had to have Red Bull, and it was all about what you did with the little dudes. And now, everybody has, to the point you made a minute ago, everybody has at least one DNF except for Oscar Piastri.
Yeah.
What the hell, dude? Come on. Like, and every time I'm like, man, I think I know what I'm doing. It's like, nah, but which is the beautiful thing about Formula One.
Yeah.
And I really am happy that not that everyone's crashing, but that we're getting races and stuff that are like we had in Canada. Kevin Magnussen and talking about the tire choice.
Yeah.
In that. So punchline, really bad. It was always raining with on the run up to the race. It was always raining. And then they started on intermediate tires.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick, let's talk about that. So we always get 3 compounds of tires, your hard, medium, soft. So Pirelli tire has a range of like 5 different tires. And you have your really soft compound and your really hard compound. And they choose it based on how abrasive the track is. If the track's really abrasive, then the tires will burn up fast, so they have to go with a harder compound tire.
Sure.
So the hardest tire you will have on race number 1 might be the softest tire you'll have on race number 2. But since all the drivers drive the same tires, same tire selection, it's all kind of comes out in the wash, if that makes sense. Well, then you can also have your intermediates and you can have your wet tires. Your intermediates are your kind that have like some part, like the outsides are slickish and the insides are like rain tires. And those are for rain, but not necessarily puddles and standing water. As soon as you're driving through a puddle, you need your wet tires. The problem with the wet tires is that as soon as it's dry, as soon as the tires start to heat up, they vaporize.
Yep.
So you need to have that cool water always on them. You need to have them pushing away all these standing puddles of water. And so when the whole field went to start, when everybody goes out for their formation lap, when they line up, their tires are covered. It's a big secret who's running what and whose strategy is running what.
Yeah.
So then everyone pulls the bonnets off their tires, and everyone can see who's running intermediates, and 2 people were running wets, which means that if it's standing water, they have great traction. If there's not standing water, they're going to burn them up and have to pit real quick.
So what do you think the mentality was there? Because here you have Haas, both drivers have their wets on.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else does.
Yeah.
Now, when you're going against the crowd like that, you're either a total moron or you're the genius who saw something that wasn't, that no one else could see. Now, with Canada, it was forecasted to rain throughout that day. When the race started, everyone's getting sprayed by the car behind them. Do you think the mentality was, let's start on our wets. We're going to be superheroes compared to everyone else in terms of maneuverability and grip. So this gives us a chance to move up in what will inevitably be a messy race where others will crash. So we're going to use up this capability now, suffer a little bit later on, but maybe that'll put us in a good position, after everyone else wipes out.
Yes.
Was that the mentality?
You're 90% there. I think you're right. I think their mentality was that the race won't last the first 2 laps without a caution.
Sure.
Let alone a red flag. And I think their mentality was they accepted that everybody should go inters. So, and where did they, here, let me pull up on my little sheet here. Where did they qualify at? Where did the Haas guys, let me pull up here. So I do race results, fastest lap. I put it into my spreadsheet right here.
Qualifying. Magnussen was at 14.
Okay.
Hulkenberg was at 19.
Okay, so they were at the back. They can't do any worse. They can't be any worse than they were.
Sure.
So if they both had to go in for the pits because they got a wrong strategy, and it went suddenly hard, it went suddenly slick, and they picked the wrong strategy, they can get their pit stop out of the way, put on their tire change out of the way, put on their hard compound, and race the entire race without needing to go into the pits again.
Yeah.
So what they did, they figured everyone else was going inters. They had to go the opposite just to see if lightning struck.
Yep.
So they put on their wet tires, and they had all that grip. If there had, let's say, because Magnussen, you're right, he was just jumping.
It was like watching Mario Kart.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and it's like, wait, that's a Haas car. How is this happening?
Because,
what universe did we wake up in?
Because how high did you say he got? He got up to 5th.
He got up to 5th.
If when he was in 7th, something happened and boom, somebody crashed and there was a red flag.
Yeah,
the positions would have been locked.
Gotcha.
And then everybody could have gone to the pits.
Yeah.
And you're allowed to change tires when there's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
So if he jumps 1 position, 2 position, 3 positions, as long as he doesn't crash, which he won't because he has the better tire.
Yeah.
Everyone crashes, positions lock, they can come in, swap out tires, match up with everybody else.
I got
and they're a few positions ahead.
And so, your safety car did come out, but not till much, much later in the race, which is the problem.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Hulkenberg ended up, we're talking about Magnussen. Magnussen ends up 12th. Yep, 12th.
Yes.
And then Hulkenberg 11th.
And the reason was because that, sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, no, you're fine.
The reason was because the crash never came.
Right.
He got up, the sun came out, the track started drying out, and then his tires, everyone else's tires, kind of they were able to push him a little bit more, and his tires became less effective.
Yep.
Because their temperature started climbing. They had less rubber meeting the road. And all of that tire stuff that people spend entire careers trying to figure out. And I'm trying to summarize here in a few minutes.
Sure.
All that stopped. So you could see his ability to pass lessened, and then he started falling back.
And we were talking about this before we were recording as well. So then he had a very slow pit when he was switching out those tires.
Exactly.
So from a race perspective, lost a lot of positions there.
Mm-hmm.
However, let's jump over to Fantasyland. All right.
Yes.
He's lost. So he's moved up from 14th up to 5th.
Yeah.
He now drops back to, I believe, 15th at this point in the actual race. How does that does that negate all of his passage in the early parts of the race from a fantasy points
perspective? It does not.
Overtakes all the way up to 5th.
Yep.
Pits, drops back to 15th now.
Yep.
Okay, so but since he was pitted, we do not lose those overtake points.
Correct.
Okay.
Because from the time you enter, you cross the white line into pit lane, you're limited to 50 miles an hour. And you are, again, until some point, I think it's a white line when you leave pit lane. Mm-hmm. And I know it depends on different tracks have different outshoots and stuff like that. But you're limited.
Okay.
And so for the Fantasy Formula 1 rules say that once you are on an in-lap, so as soon as you start noticeably decelerating to pull into the pits, to the time you are out of the pits and accelerating and getting back in the race, it doesn't matter. You do not get penalized if you are passed.
Okay, gotcha.
Because as soon as some tracks, and again, I don't have any of the numbers right off the top of my head, but some tracks you have to decelerate early to get into that pit lane.
Okay.
So as soon as you decelerate and everyone starts passing you, well, they're not going to give you negative points because everyone have negative points.
I see.
So in this case, he got a bazillion points, or like 9 or something, for passing everybody, went into pit lane, everyone passed him back because he had that slow pit stop, got out back on the track, and as far as we're concerned in Fantasyland, he still has his points.
Yep. Now,
so that's positive.
I know he's had a couple rough weeks. However, this is why we still, why we're preaching Haas in the early, in your fantasy team build, because of that performance. Even though he ends up not in the points on the official race, he still netted you 14 points, and I think he only costs, he's still only in the $7 million range. He's your leftover change driver. 14 points is great. For comparison, I think I had Lance Stroll on one of my teams. He got a total of 16 points, but he cost $13 million.
Yeah.
I still had some leftover cash on one of my teams, so I upgraded to Stroll. Yes, he was higher on the grid, or he finished in a much higher position, but from a fantasy perspective, he cost twice as much to get maybe 2 more points.
Yeah.
So,
as soon as to your point again, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But
no, you're fine.
As soon as you have those dollars just sitting there, then you might as well use them to get some sort of points. So you're not wrong.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. From a day to day, Kevin Magnussen over Lance Stroll. Again, as soon as both Haas's are crashing, then you probably go with Lance Stroll overall.
Sure.
But to your point, this race worked out really well.
Absolutely.
No, very well done. The next thing I want to talk about with everything that went on is Ferrari. So I love Ferrari. The question I want to pose to you is, I have an answer, but I want to know what you think. So we haven't talked about this yet. Does this change Ferrari at all in your eyes? Because, and to bring everybody up to date, if you haven't watched all the other podcasts, first off, please do. Second off, the Ferrari and Red Bull have been the 2 constructors to have. Everything else is secondary. Sorry, getting a little feedback. Everything else is secondary, but now McLaren's inking their way up in there.
Right. And
we'll talk about Red Bull here in a second, but Ferrari, from my perspective, has always been the team you keep since both of them do well. Charles Leclerc is challenging Max Verstappen for the lead.
Yeah. You
keep Ferrari. And then this happens where inexplicably one of them just has an engine failure.
Right.
Leclerc just doesn't do. And I need to do more research into what went on. They're like, we think we have it. Never mind, retire. And then Charles Leclerc, that was Charles Leclerc. Sorry. And then Carlos Sainz just loses it like other people did. So no harm there. But as soon as it's no harm, no foul, you spun out, and no harm, no foul, you have an engine problem. Well, then let's look at Kick Sauber and cut them all the slack in the world.
Right.
What do you think?
That's a
loaded question.
That's 93 questions right there.
Yep.
I think this is a matter of if we had gone to Montreal, and practiced our French Canadian and got to go and see the race firsthand.
Yeah.
I would have shown up in a Ferrari jersey.
Yep.
And at the end of the race, I would have been the guy in the parking lot setting it on fire. But that's because it would have been I have spent way too much money to be at this race. Stepping back from the race, looking at the season as a whole, this was going to be the race where something funky was going to happen, and it could have happened to anybody.
Yeah.
It just happened to happen twice to Ferrari. After we've been preaching, have Ferrari as one of your reliable constructors. They still are.
That's the hard part here. Yeah.
I do think you're an idiot if you step away from Ferrari at this point. However, I think you also have to look at a much bigger question where McLaren continues to gain credibility as a reliable performer with both drivers. They are I think dangerously close to what Ferrari has been for the majority of the season, which is if you have Leclerc, you're going to be fine. If you have Sainz, you're going to be fine. And Ferrari damn well better be one of your constructors. I feel almost interchangeable with them and McLaren at this point based on performance. Red Bull has to be part of that conversation too. However, I think it's kind of hilarious that this the timing here. I think Red Bull is still this stalwart powerhouse, but it is because of Max.
Yeah.
And when what I was alluding to when I think is funny is in the week that Sergio Perez is confirmed as a Red Bull driver for 25, he DNFs and takes. Oh no, he didn't take anybody out. He just
took himself out.
He took himself out,
and he didn't have he had a lackluster performance getting into it.
Correct. This was the worst thing that could have happened to him. In the face of we're standing by Checo. He's our guy. He's our consistent performer. He hasn't been. So Red Bull is still part of that conversation, but I think they're on more shaky ground collectively because if you don't have Max, you got some really good cars. But you don't have Max.
Yeah, but you don't have Max.
Correct.
And as soon as you have Red Bull racing as a constructor, you have Max, but you also have Perez.
Yeah, and if I look at Ferrari, they're losing Sainz. I'm not too worried about them because they've got Leclerc.
Yeah.
And I mean also Hamilton. But I'm saying in the face of a vacancy, you lose Lando Norris. Oh, that's not great. But you still got Oscar Piastri.
Yeah.
Piastri. He's Australian. They don't care about the A enunciation as much. Lose Piastri. Oh, that's not great. You still got Norris.
Yeah.
Red Bull. You lose Verstappen. Oh no.
No. Yeah.
You don't have a star.
You don't.
So.
And this was before we move on from because it was on our list to talk about Red Bull, McLaren, and Ferrari. Like which two constructors do you have? Because that's huge.
Right.
And so I don't want to stray too far away from that. I saw an interview that Alex Albon had about Max Verstappen, and they just brought up, I forget, it was on some podcast or something. But he was trying to explain, like, the person who asked the question was like, is Max Verstappen that great? And they make the car tailored to Max Verstappen. And he said something to the effect of, no, the example he had was like mouse sensitivity. Basically, Max Verstappen ramps up his sensitivity, and so like when you move the mouse on the screen, it just kind of darts.
Yeah.
And he said Max can do that because he's such an instinctive driver. He doesn't think. He just does. Where everybody else in the field has that little bit of thinking, so they have to back down that sensitivity, and then they can go ahead and manage it.
Yeah, it may be ultra refined, but it's
Exactly.
It's analysis before action.
Exactly. And so as soon as you have Sergio Perez, and people are like, well, what's going on with Sergio Perez, and how come he's not doing as well as Max Verstappen? Well, Max Verstappen's kind of a savant with it.
Sure.
And if Sergio Perez is an amazing technical driver, great. He absolutely is. However, Max Verstappen can just ramp up the sensitivities, and as soon as anybody's played any video games, as soon as you have all your hotkeys stacked up, and as soon as you have your mouse on a little twitch and your trackball's here, and
all muscle memory,
you can just act and you go further than, wait a minute, where's my click? Let me click here. Let me do this. So to that point, I don't want to in the real world, I don't want to persecute Red Bull for keeping Sergio Perez.
Oh, not at all.
Oh, no, you didn't. You didn't. I want to make sure we're clear.
Sure.
You and I are not persecuting them for keeping Sergio Perez. However, as soon as you have somebody, because of Max Verstappen, their price is so high.
Right.
That in the fantasy world, their price is just because of Max Verstappen.
Oh, for sure.
So as soon as Perez comes with that, with the constructor, and the reason why is because of Sergio, but not that he's a bad driver. All the fantasy points are coming from Max Verstappen.
Okay, so let me ask you then this.
Okay.
So based on setting that up, when you build a fantasy team,
yes,
would you go reliable, heavy-hitting constructors? Because of the strength of their drivers, and then for your drivers though, would you shy away from selecting drivers that are on that constructor, or would you lean into that? Because this week, if you had Ferrari and you had Leclerc or Sainz, you got double burned.
Yep, that's me.
Okay.
I got double burned.
But I think there's an argument to be made though that you still have to play that kind of game. You do. You've got to swing for the fences.
Completely agree.
You can't go solid constructors for a strong base of points and then a scattershot a roster of drivers.
Completely agree.
You have to double down.
You have to double down on somebody.
Okay.
And what my plan is, what my recommendation is going forward is that basically, to use a naval term, Sergio Perez is making the cost of Red Bull Racing as a constructor not worth it.
Yes.
So as soon as you ditch Red Bull Racing as a constructor, you can afford right now, because as soon as they keep winning, you're not going to be able to afford McLaren anymore.
Right.
You need to get on the McLaren train now if you're going to do it.
Absolutely.
Because they're at $25 million. For Red Bull Racing is at let me double check what they're at now. So Red Bull Racing is like $28 million. My teams, hang on, let me go to race weekend. Okay, where are we going here? Okay, so Ferrari is at 22.6.
Yep.
McLaren is at 25.6.
And that's all recency.
And this is
they've gone up a couple million since the season started.
Absolutely. And Red Bull is at 28.8. In 2 weeks' time, McLaren's going to catch up with I feel McLaren's going to catch up with Red Bull.
Gotcha.
Two or three races time. Now, McLaren only went up a 0.1. Fine. This is probably because of Oscar Piastri, and I don't know quite what their algorithm is for increasing the value of these teams. Ferrari dropped $500,000. McLaren went up 0.1 million, and Red Bull Racing looks like they stayed pretty consistent at 0. So what I'm suggesting is Max Verstappen is the person to keep, not necessarily Red Bull Racing.
I see.
And so by all means, keep Max if you want, if you can afford to. Or you can go to Lando Norris and save $5 million, or you can go to why I'm being cheeky, or you can go to Charles Leclerc and save $7 million.
Okay, so that's what I was talking about. So say we've gone now to ideal two constructors. Okay, we still believe in Ferrari.
Yes,
Canada was bad.
Yeah, but
we believe in Ferrari.
Absolutely.
So you're saying though maybe we go to Ferrari and McLaren as your constructors.
Yes,
but in opposition to what you had just said earlier, still maybe go with Max Verstappen, because at that point you can't afford anyone on Ferrari,
nope,
or anyone on McLaren.
Yeah, and I don't even know if you can afford that. Let me look through my drivers. I don't even know if you can afford that.
I think you can
right now,
because Max is okay. Geez, never mind. Max is 30.7. So let's do some numberology here.
So here, let me
So 22.6 for Ferrari, 25.6 for.
Let's see what we can do here. So let me add. I'm clicking around. For anybody who's not watching, I'm clicking around on one of my teams.
We're building a theoretical team, and again, this is one of those key things where you can eliminate your team. And you can build whatever you want as long as you don't hit that confirm button at the end. It'll keep to what you had before.
Exactly. So,
but what we're building is McLaren as a constructor, Ferrari as a constructor, and that puts us at 40.
Yeah, let me get rid of all these dudes. Yes, so
$48-ish million.
Yep. So you have $34.6 million in this team I have. So this is one of my. This is OMG Gold. So this is my primary. I want to win team.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if I get rid of everybody, let's remove all my constructors here real quick. I'm sitting at $113 million because of how the value of everyone's increased over the season.
Oh, okay. I see. I thought you always zeroed out at $100 million again.
Nope.
Oh, cool.
You get the value. So right now I can sell all my drivers and sell all my constructors and rebuild my team for $113 million.
Cool. I learned a thing. Thank you.
And that's because, to your point, let me go to my stats page. Let's go to where am I at? Here we go.
So your overall budget adjusts based on the value of the last drivers and constructors that you had.
Exactly.
Cool.
So for actually, let me go. I'm at the wrong spot. So I have my big Excel sheet here. Let me break it out, and because I have all these numbers available, I actually have to go to.
So while Paul's doing this,
yeah,
I'll just re-summarize here. We're looking to see, can you still build an effective team if you are paying for McLaren and Ferrari as a constructor, and you have Max Verstappen? How much money do you have left?
How much money do you have?
Can you fill out a team with the the scraping the bottom of the barrel?
So I'm at 113.5 million.
Okay,
let's add Matt. That's Sergio Perez. That's not who we want.
No.
So let's go with value. Okay, and let's go with come on, computer, value again. Let's go all the way to the top. Value. There you go. Max Verstappen. We're adding him for 30.7.
Yep.
Going right to the constructors, leaving Red Bull, adding McLaren, adding Ferrari.
And that leaves you with $34 million.
Which, if you were starting F1 brand new right now, that means you have $20 million.
Correct.
So if you're just starting, or if you had bad selections before, you cannot afford to do it.
Well, let's see what you can do.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So I'm gonna go with my dream people, the people who I would want, right?
Okay.
Well, no, let's start at the bottom to see if it's possible.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Start at the bottom,
that means
working the way
Logan
up.
Sargent, all of Kick Sauber. So you have Max, Williams, and Kick Sauber.
Williams, who both got DNFs last week, and Kick Sauber, who, I mean, they did fine. They actually put up some points last week, but and their value, each of their value went up $500,000. And I do want to point that out. So right now, just since last week, both Kick Sauber drivers went up $500,000. Max went up 0.1. McLaren went up 0.2. So this whole buy right here has increased since last week. Was it 1.3 million, but decreased because of the 0.5 of Ferrari, 0.2 of each of the Williams, decreased 0.9. So the whole value of this team has increased to $500,000 from last week.
Yep.
So if I had gotten this last week, I'd be paying $500,000 less than I'm getting this week.
Yes.
Which is why it's important to do this earlier and kind of stick with your team.
Okay. So this leaves you, though, with $5 million. Why don't you drop Logan and see what else you can do?
All right, let's drop.
Because at this point, Logan Sargent, our countryman, I love you, man. But my problem is this. I feel like if there is a legitimate reason to crash, he crashes. So week to week, it's like, oh, you know what? It makes sense that he did because, like in Canada, anything could have happened to anyone, but of course it's going to happen to Logan. Yeah. So that's where I am with him.
No, I completely agree. So we were able to get Kevin Magnussen on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we drop Logan, we get Kevin Magnussen. Now we're down to 0.7.
And he jumped $1 million on his own. He's $9.9 million.
Right.
Yeah.
So as soon as we had done this last week, it would have been better.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
For sure. And so now if we drop Alex Albon, because he's actually who I would drop over both of the Kick Sauber guys.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And that's a controversial statement, but that's who I would do.
Sure.
So who can we have? No one.
No one.
So let me go to...
no, I'm sorry. I'm not good at computers.
So as soon as we drop that Alex Albon, Alex Albon's all we can have. So he's at 8.1, 8 million for Valtteri, 7.9 for... Let's try this, though. Let me just go to Nico Hülkenberg and then drop Alex Albon. And, we can get Yuki Tsunoda. We can get Kevin... That doesn't make sense.
Okay, so here...
There we go. I don't know why that worked this time and not last time.
Look at that. So you can go Verstappen, all of Haas, and then all of Kick Sauber. So Kick Sauber is your highest liability there.
Yeah.
Which is legitimate. But as long as they don't DNF... They're not going to hurt you badly.
They won't.
So and then you got Max. The problem is you're not going to double up on those points because you don't have a driver associated with your constructor. Yeah. So let's
do that.
Let's continue this game. Let's drop Max Verstappen, and suddenly you've got $30.7 million to play with.
Yep. So who do we want? Do we want Lando Norris or do we want Carlos Sainz?
Ooh. So why are we not considering Charles Leclerc?
Charles Leclerc.
Okay,
sorry, not Charles Leclerc, and Lando Norris. Okay, those two leading drivers for each.
Right, and so Lando Norris is $25.8 million.
Yep.
Charles Leclerc is 23.1. So the question now becomes, because I believe in both of these guys.
Yes.
The question now, I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. This is like some
that's awesome.
Really weird. This is my gang. The question becomes, what would you do with that $2.7 million difference? Would that allow you to upgrade multiple spare change drivers? I kind of doubt it, because you've already got Haas, which is, you could maybe upgrade from one of the Kick Sauber drivers to Yuki Tsunoda, who's been kind of a good dark horse fantasy.
Yeah, because Yuki's at 9.6.
So that's weird because so suddenly Kevin Magnussen's more expensive than Yuki Tsunoda.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Probably just, and honestly, from this last one, because Yuki went down 0.2 million last week because he lost those places. He qualified well, finished low. He qualified high, finished low.
Yeah.
And so that'll probably ding you where Kevin Magnussen qualified low, finished high.
Okay.
And
So my plan would be this. Let's go with Charles Leclerc because he's $2 million cheaper than Lando Norris. Nothing against Lando Norris.
No.
I mean, like he got his second straight second place, right? Like the dude's performing.
He is.
But let me go.
Who do you drop? Valtteri or Jogan Yu?
Do we have their cumulative fantasy
so let's
point
see.
totals here?
So let's go with Jogan Yu is 42 points
on the season.
And
this is in fantasy points.
This is fantasy points for the season. And Valtteri's 19.
Okay, so I'm going to drop Valtteri for cumulative performance reasons.
Okay. And now suddenly
we have Charles Leclerc, all of Haas, a blank driver space, and $15 million. $15
million. Now keep in mind this is with a $13 million earning over the course of the year so far.
Correct.
But as soon as you dropped Nico Hülkenberg, dropped Kevin Magnussen, and went with just the Williams drivers, you can do this with a little bit less.
Right. And so this is where it gets interesting too, because you don't want to fall into the trap of, well, I want to spend as much money as I can, because look at Yuki Tsunoda versus Esteban Ocon. Yuki's at $9.6 million, and he's worked his way up to that amount. He's gotten 47 points on the year. Esteban Ocon is $10.2 million, and he's been consistently in the 9-10 region, and he's only gotten 41 total so far. So spending all of your money doesn't mean you're going to necessarily get a better result.
Correct.
Same thing, Lance Stroll, he's 14 million on the season. He's got 38 points.
Yeah. So in this situation, I would go Yuki.
Yeah. And then pray that he has a bad qualifying.
Yeah, honestly, and hope he has a bad qualifying.
Yeah, but start him at P20 and just let him cook.
And then here we go, though. Here we go. Jogan Yu.
Okay.
We have $6 million left over.
See, that is so tempting. If we drop Jogan Yu, we're back to 13 million.
Back to 13. That means we can get Esteban Ocon. But let's go off season points.
Okay.
So let's go to the top. Okay, going down, we have Yuki Tsunoda. We have Kevin Magnussen.
Yep.
The next is Jogan Yu at 42 points.
Exactly. So
then Esteban Ocon at 41.
Gotcha.
See, so they're close.
But here's the thing. These are the two teams that we've been ragging on all season long in terms of reliability. Alpine and Kick Sauber, it's like regardless of the drivers, the pitting has been bad, the team dynamic has been bad, and those are those weird intangibles that end up screwing you over for points.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is one of those things where we'll be, fully upfront and say, I don't know what to do here, and you could be a genius next week, or you could be a total idiot,
So, I just saw something horrible.
What's that?
No, we're fine. I was about to say, because as soon as you put Jogan Yu, hang on a second, let's go down to value. Who's at the bottom? Logan, Jogan Yu. Okay, cool. We can't go much under these.
Okay, yeah.
So if we go Jogan Yu, then that means with Charles Leclerc. So right now we have both Haas, Yuki, and Jogan Yu.
Yeah.
We can still dump Charles Leclerc and get Lando.
Yeah.
So with this,
that's the thing. Okay, so now
So
cumulative points, Charles Leclerc even today has 25 more points.
Yeah.
25 more fantasy points than Lando Norris.
And here but actually I have a thing to talk about after we're done with this little fantasy build here. So yeah, if I love the idea, let me back it up here. A way to look at this is who are your podium and who are your top 6.
Okay.
Because whoever finishes in the top 5, top 6
nets you fantasy points.
Yep. Consistently. So as soon as both McLaren drivers and both Ferrari drivers are always somewhere in your top 6, who's usually number 1 in the top 6? Gotcha. Max Verstappen.
Yes.
So as soon as you have both McLaren, both Ferrari, and Max Verstappen, one way or another, odds are very good of you getting all the points available in the top 5.
Yeah.
One way or another. Where as soon as you don't have Max Verstappen, you're going to leave some points on the table.
That's fair.
Granted, as soon as you have a McLaren or a Ferrari lead driver, you double down on the points they do get.
Sure.
But the only reason Red Bull isn't in this build anymore is because Sergio Perez is just costing us too many points right now.
Correct. Let me ask this. Let's stick to the, and we're not recording the screen here, are we?
No, we're not.
This would have been a good time to have done that. However, so thanks for sticking with us. We're going to try to keep, doing the audio description for you. But let's do this. Is there a world in which we can get Ferrari as a constructor, McLaren as a constructor, and then we skip out on Leclerc and Norris, but go Sainz and Piastri.
Ooh.
And then go Williams and Kickstopper for our remaining three drivers.
Not gonna lie, if I can go Sainz and Piastri, that might be the rate. That might be the team. We can do it. Close.
It's very close.
It's
Let's
close. Let's see what we can get.
Scroll on down to the bottom there. Oh, it works. Okay. So
keep in mind. Remember, we're 13 million over cap right now.
Correct. So starting with $113 million, you get McLaren at 25.6 as a constructor, Ferrari at 22.6 as a constructor. But now, because we just preached the importance of having a heavy hitter driver to match up with your constructor, you can do it with both Ferrari and McLaren if you go with their number 2 drivers, Sainz and Piastri. And then you're going bottom of the barrel with Logan Sargent, Zhou Yu, and Valtteri Bottas. So that leaves you with $0.7 million. The problem is the potential liability that works here. So here's another takeaway I got this week. Fantasy wise, I got spanked. But what saved me was I used my no negatives.
Oh, nice.
On 2 of my 3 teams, because otherwise I would have gotten negative 41 points for one of my teams, just because I had Ferrari and I had Leclerc and he was my DRS as well. So, all of those DNF negative points doubled up on me. But in this situation where you have high liability cheap drivers, but 2 heavy hitters with 2 heavy hitter constructors, try that for a week. If you haven't used up your no negative, this is worth a shot, because that way Logan can't accidentally hurt you, and you have 2 solid performers on 2 solid in 2 solid cars.
Man, and my take on this strategy though, because we have Ferrari and McLaren, we have Carlos Sainz and Oscar. This would be a great build to use your 3X on.
I think so, yeah.
That could work, because you'll just get double, but I don't know what you would do, Oscar or Carlos, for your 3X. And that's a whole nother conversation.
And if you're going to think about using 3X, make sure it's on a sprint week.
Yes, and I'm working on a spreadsheet that best projects. I've projected which I want to revisit it before I put it out here.
Yeah.
But I have worked the numbers and I calculated laps and DRS zones and all of this. And in an upcoming one we can discuss, I think I know the best races by the numbers to use all your chips on.
Okay.
Which doesn't help us for some of the ones I've already used, but that's okay. And that's only because I got spanked, as you put it, on a former race. But back to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
I think you would need to, if you're going to run with Oscar Piastri and Carlos Sainz and both of those constructors, you'd need to do it for a few races. You would need to do it for some to actually get that benefit.
Sure.
Because in any one race, these guys will be in the top 6.
Yeah.
But they might not make podium in any one race.
I hear what you're saying, yeah.
So, but also Max Verstappen might not make podium, but he'll make it more. I don't know. I think you would have to, those drivers I think will be consistently getting you points.
Right.
Yeah, man, that's interesting.
They will. I think this team would do very well for you, but you have to, as you're watching the race, just divorce yourself from the notion that, oh no, Max won and my guys didn't. That can't matter too much to you.
No, it can't. It just has to be a chill time, a zen out. Like you're in it for the next. We're 9 races in. We're 9 races complete. We're going to do it for the next 5 or 6. We're just going to have this team go and just let it ride and let him chill, which is going to be very difficult to do with Logan Sargent on your. Again, love you, bud.
Yeah.
But from a fantasy standpoint, it's not looking.
It's not been great. So
no.
So anyway, moving on though, this week you want to do our segment "Living Vicariously Through Ben."
Let's do this. Live Vicariously Through Ben.
All right, I'm going to break down my my fantasy team here. Team 1, Newbie Alpha. This is the team that I'm trying to be a high performer with, which didn't work out well for me this week. 124 points. This week I had, and the only reason I even got 124 is because, as I mentioned before, I used my no negatives, because I had Charles Leclerc and I also gave him my 2X. Because I had no negative, he actually netted me 8 points because of his overtake.
Oh, nice.
On my other teams where I have Charles Leclerc, you'll see he got me negative 36 points, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Alex Albon got 8 points. So did he not did he DNF or did he make it far enough? See, it looks like.
So let me see.
Okay, he did DNF, so he got negative 20 points for DNFing, but he had a couple overtakes. So
he had 7 overtake. He had 7 race overtake bonus, -20 for a race not classified, and
qualifying
1
in 10th. So on here, I got 8 points from him.
Yeah.
Kevin Magnussen got me 14 points.
Sick.
Hulkenberg got me 19 points.
Nice.
Yuki Tsunoda got me 6 points, and then I had Red Bull Racing got me 45, and then Ferrari, because I had the no negative, got me 24 points.
Yeah, because if you look at Red Bull for Canada, they only got you said 45? Yeah, so you're showing 25 on yours.
Correct.
But if you look at the actual how well Red Bull did, they're showing 25 because they took -20 because of Sergio Perez.
Sergio Perez, correct.
Yeah, and same with Ferrari. Like I had -16, yeah, just like everybody else who has Ferrari. So perfect week for doing no negative.
Oh, yeah.
Well done.
For 3 of the 4 cars for my constructors doing that poorly.
Yeah, that's huge.
That was I didn't have a good week, but it should have been so much worse. Speaking of, bad transition. My second team, RB Dragonfruit, actually did significantly better at Lando.
Wow.
I did use my no negative again, which
it saved you points. It was well worth it.
It saved me on Logan Sargent because
you saved 40 points. You saved you on Logan Sargent and it saved you on Sergio Perez.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, okay. So
that was the perfect use of it, dude.
216 points on the week for this team. I had McLaren as a constructor and Red Bull as a constructor. So as you said, I got 45 points from Red Bull instead of 25.
Yeah.
Lando Norris, I 2x'd him, so 80 points there. Zhou Yu, 6 points. Nico Hulkenberg, 19. Valtteri Bottas, 8. And then Logan Sargent, who should have cost me, I got a point from him.
Yeah.
So
man,
that worked out. And then the Stathams, Team 3.
This looks a lot like my team.
Yeah, I got 13 total points. First, I got penalized 10 points for making 3 changes. Second, and this one I didn't do any no negative, and I had Ferrari and Charles Leclerc. So negative 32 points for Charles Leclerc, 0 for Yuki Tsunoda, which doesn't bother me because, again, you're cheaper drivers. You're just looking to minimize liability. Nico Hulkenberg, 19. Lance Stroll. See, I love you, buddy. I actually put you on my team.
Nice.
He got me 14 points, too. Look at that. Logan Sargent, -19. Ferrari, -16. And if you're getting negative for your constructor, you're dead. And then I had McLaren. So I went Ferrari McLaren on this one, and cumulative 13 points for my my farm team here.
That's rough.
So I'm sticking with Ferrari. I'm not scared off.
No.
And I don't know how much I'm actually going to change this week, just because. In 11 days we're recording on a Monday.
So what, 12 days? I guess.
So whenever Spain's coming up, Spain next.
Spain
right?
next.
Okay.
Yeah, in 2 weeks. Not this weekend, but the next weekend.
Correct. So
and the only looking at we just live vicariously through you, so I won't worry about going through all my teams. I had some of the same issues, except I didn't use any of my no negatives.
Yeah.
The only thing, the big Ferrari and Haas, they're fine. They had their bum weeks. The thing to consider is McLaren is very, very strong. So like you, I had Lando Norris as one of my 2X drivers, got me 80 points, and McLaren did so well, it got me 57 points. So having Lando Norris as your lead driver and having McLaren as your constructor paid off huge this week.
Yeah.
Max Verstappen, 74 points if he was your 2X driver. And I think I have one of my teams has a Red Bull on here, maybe not. But you have Red Bull on one of yours, and it had to be 25, right?
Yep.
So, and this is kind of harkening back to what we had before, but on a race, as soon as Sergio Perez doesn't even show up like he did here in Canada, Red Bull gets, as soon as Sergio Perez doesn't do well and then DNFs, Red Bull Racing gets you 25 points.
Yeah.
Max Verstappen, when he just does his standard Max Verstappen stuff, gets you 74. So there is a strong, whereas with McLaren and with Ferrari, man, keep both drivers, keep the constructor. That's a solid plan.
I think so.
I completely agree.
It was a freak week, and you know what? And a couple months ago now, if you want to go through the backlog of our episodes, we had an episode that was all about explaining the chips and how to use them and when to use them. And as the season goes on, I'm having a lot of fun because I'm actually seeing, okay, what is going to be a trigger for me, or what is going to be a flag for, this is the time to use this chip. So some chips are kind of offensive in nature, where it's like, I want to go big on points.
Yeah.
Other ones are, I want to minimize my liability. The no negative one, for me now, I think the biggest lesson that I'm taking away is I'm going to look at the weather on race week.
That's a very good point.
Just because if it's a rainy day, I mean, whether you're in Monaco, whether you're in Japan, that's a huge X factor in terms of, you can almost count on something going disastrously wrong, but you have no idea where or to whom. Especially
and how you would do that is, especially for the people who don't necessarily keep up with it, because I wake up in the middle of the night to watch free practice.
Yeah.
And as soon as that's not quite how hard anyone's taking it, you can very easily, as soon as you have usually a 4-hour window, a 3 or 4 hour window between free practice 3 and the start of qualifying.
Yeah.
Take a look at free practice, and as soon as you see it covered in rain, and if you go to watch their quick summary, their 30-minute summary on F1.com, and people are like, oh, it's raining, oh, it's still slick, oh, people are sliding. That's not, then to your point, that's a good idea.
And that's the kind of the beauty of Formula One. It is this perfect confluence of ultra precise skill, engineering, team dynamics, and whatever the heck might just happen. And so weather is one of those things that might just happen to anybody.
Yeah.
I can't predict when Max's brakes are going to go out or when there's going to be a power unit failure. But if the weather's bad, you can almost certainly count on something
happening
just historically wrong. And those are going to be the elements that tip you towards maybe throwing your no negative on there.
Great point.
Just as a little bit of insurance, and it's it gave me a bad week versus a catastrophic week. So.
No, good point. Good point. And so we talked about let's see. Oh, here, one thing. So I want to go over all of the DNFs.
Oh, yeah.
So because I'm a glutton for punishment, I like to keep track of how many DNFs and who does what, and I need to update it a little bit. But it's automatic in my spreadsheet. So far, we have had 510 points penalized, fantasy-wide, 510 points penalized for DNFs. And that does not take into account all the points they would have earned. So with Max Verstappen, or Lando Norris and Max Verstappen each have a DNF, and they each on great races put up 70s, 80s points.
Sure.
So as soon as Max Verstappen goes negative 20, he loses that 80 points and goes negative 20. So every time Logan or Max go one DNF, it's kind of a 100-point swing. You could view it as a 100-point swing. This doesn't take it into account. So whereas 510 points have been subtracted from the overall roster, have been awarded in penalties. How about that? I'll put it that way. 510 points have been awarded in penalties for DNFs so far this season. Easily times 3 that for points not made that they would have made.
Yeah.
So as soon as you're like me and you're like, how, and you take this serious and you're like, oh my gosh, how come people, exactly to the point that Ben and I are doing, don't worry about it. Everybody has it right now.
Oh, sure.
Everybody has. Be careful about your Alex Albon, who has 3. Your Charles Leclerc, or Daniel Ricciardo, who has 2. Lance Stroll, who has 2. Logan Sargent, my buddy, who has 2.
But look at that though. So who's got the most DNF penalty points of the entire grid?
Of the entire grid, Logan Sargent has negative 45. Alex Albon has negative 60.
Interesting there.
Yeah.
So now, this does not factor in the did not races because
exactly.
This is strictly due to actual DNFs. They started the race and did not.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point though, because Logan Sargent has 3 DNFs. 2 have been in the race. 1 have been in qualifying. Alex Albon, all 3 of his have been in races. So he's been awarded negative 60 points for DNFs. Logan Sargent's only been awarded negative 45.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there have been, I'm keeping track of the disqualifications, but I haven't factored in disqualification points because I have to rework my entire spreadsheet in order to be able to do that, which I will. I won't let you down.
No.
But it's just sick. So there's plenty of negative points being awarded all over the place.
Sure.
And I'm not saying we need to not worry about it, but when it comes to your McLarens, your Ferraris, and your Red Bulls, as soon as DNFs happen, by all means take into consideration that Sergio Perez has had 2 of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so here's a stat taken out of context.
Sure.
There's only 5 DNF points of difference between Sergio Perez and Logan Sargent.
Ooh.
And how much more expensive is
right.
Checo than Logan Sargent?
So much more expensive.
Now again, adding context is, well, how many more points has he scored for you?
But
a lot.
But you're
still.
absolutely right. As soon as you say the sentence, which I have said,
Yeah.
Logan Sargent DNFs a lot. Logan Sargent equals do not put on your fantasy team, except for one DNF in a qualifying once, which I don't think that was even necessarily his fault. Maybe it was. I have to go back and look. Checo is exactly the same. Exactly the same boat. So as soon as you're only looking at DNFs, which I tend to when it comes to Logan Sargent, you can't do that. Then you have to give it to Sergio Perez.
And there's a $16 million price tag difference. That's wild.
Yeah.
So.
Oh gosh, and then we can do a deep dive into other points and stuff once we're done ironing those out. There's a lot to uncover, and I've copied them into the spreadsheet, but I want to get some better analysis before we go talking about it too much.
Sounds good.
But let me check my notes and see what else we have. Anything?
I mean, just musical chairs elements. Vols, the principal for Williams, is saying that Sainz is definitely a target to land as a driver. Do you think there's a world in which Sainz agrees to join Williams?
So Alex Albon's there for another 2 years.
Yes.
And I need to look back on Alex Albon, who he's been teammates with and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They would need to offer Sainz a lot of money.
So much money.
He would need to be the lead driver. They would need to be. The only thing I can think of is that he would have, first off of this, he would have to sign a multi-year deal.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because they're going to have one more year of the current Williams not being too competitive, and then the whole formula gets changed again for 2026.
Yeah.
So they have to be looking ahead of, okay, we'll do one more year of lessons learned, and then start planning for the next car. Would Sainz do it? I mean, I guess maybe he would, but there'd have to be money and there'd have to be a good plan. And this is where I think, how about this? This is where it would have to come into that you and I and everybody else armchair quarterbacking Formula One throughout the week, which we love to do as spectators and fans of the sport.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. It's within our right, and Formula One wouldn't exist without you, me, and every other F1 fan out there talking about it.
Oh, for sure.
However, there has to be so much going on behind the scenes, and that would be what it would influence Carlos Sainz to do it.
Because along those lines too, who knows how much star power he actually has, or how much he was just towing the company line. But when Albon had re-signed with Williams, he was like, "No, I'm excited to be part of this team," because Mercedes has a big hand in Williams.
Okay,
and so he was talking about his faith in Mercedes design capabilities, especially as the new requirements roll out. So again, who knows how much of that was prepared by their PR team?
Yeah.
But how much of that, or how much of that was legitimate excitement? Because what if Mercedes and Williams do have the inside track on something really exciting down the road, 26 and beyond?
Yeah. No, and that's a very valid point, because even this week in Canada, there was a lot of talk about how Mercedes has a new front wing.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, Mercedes has a new front wing. And if you're like me, I brushed it off. I'm like, okay, that's nice. I'm really happy they have a new front wing. They haven't been competitive. I'm really not worried about it too much.
But suddenly they're on the podium.
Boom. And now, granted, you can say it was because both Ferraris weren't there. However,
fair. No, and that's you can't not have that conversation though.
You can't not have the conversation completely. But it was also, they were there. They were challenging. They qualified P1.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then they were fighting each other for it. And sure, the last couple laps, tires burning out, blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
Got it. But they were there. So
yeah,
So as soon as you're sitting here saying that Mercedes, if Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz can look behind the curtain, see a bunch of cool Mercedes stuff coming their way, I could see it.
Yeah.
I think that'd be sick. I think it'd be awesome. But we can't have, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, drop Red Bull Racing as a constructor in Fantasy Formula One in favor of McLaren. That talk without this talk. Logan Sargent. One, is he going to make it through the rest of the season? Two, will he still be in Formula One as a primary driver in 2025? I have an opinion.
Okay.
But I'll kick it to you to see what you think. Or
I think he gets through the season.
Okay, I agree.
And I think this will have been his stint in Formula One that he looks back on when he's an old man and says, "I was a Formula One driver."
Yeah.
And I think it was a 2-year window. He may be a reserve driver somewhere, just because having Formula One drive
absolutely.
time is invaluable. But I think there are too many up and comers. I think there are too many. With the fact that they're already talking about, we want signs.
Yeah.
I mean that shows, Sargent's out. But I don't know where he would land. Just because I know Audi, they've got Hulkenberg next year. I know that you've got your Liam Lawson's waiting in the wings, potentially for RB. You've got your Ollie Behrmans. You've got this other guy whose name I'm blanking on right now. He's 17 years old, but
I'm talking about him. He's
So I think there are too many fresh faces waiting to come in and join the grid. So I think unless he does something miraculous, I think this is going to be the end of our countryman.
I'm pretty much in the same boat there. I think that if they can get him cheap, then fine.
Sure.
I think that if he starts to shine towards the end of the year more, like he's just not as competitive as they want him to be, right? And DNF wise, he's on par with Sergio Perez, and and all this roughly. I think if he can pull it out, like the V-Carb drivers have been doing recently, I think he has a chance. But I also think if they can get him cheap enough, and I also think because there's one more year before all the rules change, it depends on what Williams is wanting to do.
I see.
First off, I think if Carlos Sainz wants to go to Williams, Logan's out. If Carlos Sainz doesn't go to Williams, well, then I could see them basically paying him whatever to borrow the baseball term, the league minimum is. He gets one more year to stay in to try and right the ship.
Sure.
And then when they but then they don't factor him into the new stuff in 2026.
Gotcha. No, you're absolutely right. You can't not think about 26, which makes these discussions a lot less fun.
Yes,
it's not that 25 no longer matters, but you have to consider that this is going to be a whole new animal in 2 years.
Yeah.
So
hopefully he stays in. I want to see him stay in. I really do.
Yeah. On that front, what do you think about Daniel Ricciardo? Because here he finally outperforms Yuki Tsunoda for the first time this season. So was that Yuki having an off day, or was that Daniel finally returning to form a little bit?
I think it was Yuki having an off day because he was leading and then he spun out.
Okay, fair.
And now, again, I don't remember if somebody else was involved in it. I don't remember if Daniel Ricciardo was ahead of Yuki when he did it. I think it's just racing is racing. And I think it happened the same as it happened to everybody else.
That's a very valid point.
But,
he outperformed because something noticeably went wrong with Yuki, as opposed to they were both racing and he found more opportunities.
Yeah.
So
and on a day when Ferrari wasn't really a factor, they both did well. I take that. However, he did do strong. So where did he qualify at?
I
have to pull it up.
Pulled that up.
I know. I should have.
We're still
it's okay.
Amateurs here. We're all right. Past
looking up our spreadsheets
Canada.
just like everybody else. Right. Let's see. Qualifying. He qualified. He got into the Yuki Tsunoda. Daniel Ricciardo qualified 5th. Okay, so he out-qualified Yuki Tsunoda.
He did. And then in the race, they finished. Tsunoda got 14th, and Daniel Ricciardo got 8th.
8th. See, I think if Daniel Ricciardo can keep this up, now granted, even in a week when both Ferraris weren't really a factor, and both Ferraris and Sergio Perez weren't a factor for this race in Canada. Because of that, Daniel Ricciardo, but even if you had, let's say all of them had done better than Daniel Ricciardo,
he would have gotten a point.
Would have gotten in the top 10. He would have gotten the points.
Yep.
So I think here's my optimistic. My optimistic side for Daniel Ricciardo is that this is the start of something great for him and Yuki. How about that for all of V-Carb?
Sure.
Because they've been trying to get something going on. When we came into the season, I was like, man, V-Carb's going to be they're going to be good. They're the baby Red Bull. Let's watch them. Let's watch that baby grow.
Yeah. And
it hasn't been the way it's been so far. But now, hopefully, here in Canada, they both showed that they could perform. Even if you bring everybody else in, they're still barely in the top 10 or knocking on the door.
Yeah.
I think if they can do great things, I think they'll keep Daniel Ricciardo around. Everybody in V-Carb wants Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo to be the people to keep going forward.
Yeah.
When they got them on this team, it wasn't like with Logan. we'll see how you do. We'll give you another year.
Right. And of course, they just re-signed Yuki for a couple years. So,
and as soon as Daniel Ricciardo, I forgot about that. You're right. And then as soon as Daniel Ricciardo can continually keep up with Yuki, I don't think they'll get rid of him. I think they'll sign them both. And
this will be what they wanted it to be 2 years ago.
Exactly. Do I see Daniel Ricciardo, if something goes on with Sergio Perez, do I see Daniel Ricciardo moving up to Red Bull Actual? No. Not
I think at this stage, he's happy to be where he is because you're still an F1 racer, man.
Yeah, and I think as soon as V-Carb is consistently in the top 10, they're not going to kill the golden goose. I think they're going to let them at least both roll over into next year and try and keep that gravy train going.
Yeah,
and see how it breaks from there, for sure. Well, I think that's all we had. Do you have any parting shots or saved rounds?
No, we had lessons learned. We licked our wounds a little bit. We speculated quite a bit. I think that's what you're supposed to do on a podcast.
Absolutely.
So hey, thanks for joining us. Thanks for sitting with us through all this analysis and what ifs. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, please give us a 5-star review. Tell your friends about us.
Yep.
And we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Take care.